Welcome back for part 2 of the booth build. Yes, welcome back to the next part in my series of this vocal booth build. Now then, one thing I want to mention at the beginning of this is the actual design of my booth. It is something which it's being developed as it goes along, but I do have a basic concept in my head of what I want to do. And I just want to share that with you so that you have a concept as well as to what we're working towards and maybe something that you might want to put together. Now, I've not gone for a square booth and I've not gone for a rectangular booth. It's more like a booth which is like a rectangle but with one of the corners chopped off. Can you envisage that? I'm not really good on the graphics of things yet on the video, so I can't really show that to you. But that's the idea, and the reason why I'm doing that is because if you do that, then I'm not going to get any standing waves inside the booth when I'm talking. And this is something that I've picked up on in my research over the internet of like the best designs you can get for a booth. It's also going to be ventilated, and I mean properly ventilated. So I've spent also a long time figuring out how to ventilate, and I've really not yet come to a final conclusion on how it's going to be really put together. But it is going to be ventilated with an extraction fan taking the hot air out from the top, and also that's going to be active, and then down from below there is going to be a passive inlet where the air is just going to be sucked out through through that inlet. And then also inside it's going to be sound absorption. There's going to be sound treatment inside. I've not yet figured out how that's going to look particularly, but that's the basic idea. Okay, so now in the following video to come, you will see me going into the next stage of the build. I've got more to do on the floor because so far you've seen the base being square. Well, that is going to be expanded, so you will see that. And also I get into making the stud walls and putting in the first bit of soundproofing into my stud wall and getting the basic build of the booth kind of assembled together before I bring it into the house, because it is being built in the house, but initially some of the stuff is being built outside of the house and then being brought in. All right, so the reason for that is because I'm working in a very small space here and I need to do my work in the garage. And when I've done the work in the garage, I'll bring it into the house and then I'll fit it into the house. So most of my woodwork is being done in the garage, and then obviously my assembly is being done in the room here. I think I've covered everything for now, thought-wise, in that. It's basically just getting the structure together right now. So let's not waste any more time and get into the video. As a recap then, here is the base which you've seen before in the last video, and what I'm going to do is place on top of it this underlay, which is 1200mm by 600mm and 15mm thick. And I took it outside and put it on top of the base and cut it to size. Now that's what's going to go under the carpets, and it is also soundproof. Now this is the first of the stud framing, very simply put together. It's just some stud pieces screwed together and held in place by the brackets, as you can see there. And then to make something fit onto a square base, you need some corners, and these additional pieces of wood are there to help you create corners. It makes the corners there just a little bit thicker. Now when I place the two together on the base, one with the thickness and one without, you will see how this actually works, because when you place them together it actually creates here you can see that there's a little bit more sticking out, and you can actually screw something onto that, and that's what you're going to screw your resilient bars or your plasterboard onto. And so now we're ready to start cutting the exterior walls, which is OSB 3 and 11mm thick. Now my friend here called Peter Woodley, who's a local handyman, was kind enough to come over and give me a hand cutting my wood for me, which is he's making a nice straight line there, so that I don't have to do it with my handsaw and make a mess of it. So he's actually using some proper tools there to cut a nice straight line. Now this is going to be my first wall, and this is going to be screwed onto the stud walling that you saw me make earlier. And then he cuts across the top so that it's the right size to fit onto the stud wall that I made earlier. Top man does a good job. If you want to hire him, just use the email address provided in the description below. This is a barrier shield. It's 5mm thick, and it's what's used to provide the soundproofing on my panels. So here you can see I've put a sheet down and I've cut it to size so that it fits. I actually did 2 pieces to fit across the whole board, and then I lifted it and screwed it on to the stud wall. The reason being is I wanted to actually get a mock-up of what this thing would look like when put together outside rather than waiting until I got it inside. So you get a good idea of how it's going to all kind of come together by doing this here. Here's my man Peter again, cutting a piece of wood. This is the second piece of wood that he's going to cut, which is for the second stud wall. And once this is cut, I'm going to lay it down on the floor again and put 2 pieces of that barrier shield onto it. The piece we just cut is on the left, and we've laid down the barrier shield on the right so that we can then place the piece that we cut on top of it and use it as a template to get the exact right size. Here I've screwed it to the second stud wall, and now you can see what that looks like with the 2 walls up. Now it was time to take it all apart and get it into the house. What I wanted to do next is actually put some green glue onto the barrier shield and onto the wood, and actually glue down my first piece of rubber onto my wood. This comes in 2 halves, so I'm going to do this top half first, and I flipped it over and got it down and positioned nicely, as you can see here in this footage. And you will notice on this video that I've actually got the board raised up on some blocks to make sure it's not on the carpet, and enables me to get a grip underneath once it's ready to be lifted, because this is going to be heavy. Here I'm doing the same thing on the second half of the rubber, and you can see that I've put green glue on it already, and also green glue on the base. Now, to be honest with you, that's actually not enough green glue, because this stuff doesn't stick very well if you don't put enough on. You really need to cover the thing with green glue, otherwise it's not going to stick. The problem I found later on was that when I flipped it over, it started to peel off due to its own weight. So that's not so good. So you need to put a lot of green glue on there. But the thing is, green glue is also very expensive. That's why I was being a bit tight with it. To be honest, it didn't really work out that well, because if you think about it, how is this actually going to be assembled? Once I've got these glued on, I then need to put the actual stud framing on top of it, but I need to screw in from the other side. So what I have to do is actually flip it over, and that's when I found out that there wasn't enough green glue on it, because after literally a few seconds the rubber starts peeling off due to its own weight. I even waited 24 hours before I tried to attempt this so that it had enough time for the glue to set. But with green glue, it doesn't actually set permanently. It stays a little bit elastic. So I had a problem with that. So what I had to do is actually take the stud walling off and put more glue on. Let it set, and then put the stud wall, place the stud wall on, flip it over, and then screw into it to tighten it down. And then it was locked into position. But of course, without the stud wall going down the middle to help support the middle of the rubber, I had a problem. So I did have to put that bar in to make sure that the rubber was not going to fall off. And also had to make sure that I did it damn bloody quick as well. Speed was definitely of the essence. Another thing to consider as well is when you have the bar going down the middle of the wood, you actually need to know where to screw into from the other side. So it's a good idea to place your stud wall with the central bar in place on top of your piece of wood, and use that as a template first. Get a pencil and draw the line. Also draw the lines on the edges so you know where you can screw your screws. Once that's drawn on there, you can then flip your board over, glue your barrier shield onto it, let that dry, and then turn it over and screw all of your screws in around the edges and down the middle. This one, you can see I didn't do it, so I had a lot of fun with this one, but you get the idea of what it would look like when it's finished. Now here you can see the extension to the base, which I mentioned in the introduction to this video, and here you can see that I've actually put the U-boats onto it to make it into a floating floor. Now this is pretty much all you're going to see of this, unfortunately. So what I did is I used some heavy duty timber fixings and I bolted it to the side of the square base, then put my floor panel on, and as you can see here, my barrier shield. Now it was time for the carpet. So this marvellous piece of carpet that I bought for £5, I rolled it across the base, I marked it out, I cut it, and there's the result. So there you have it. Now you can see the actual shape of the booth as the footprint is on the floor. I've got my carpet on. It looks lovely. It's a nice soft carpet. Looking forward to doing barefooted voiceovers on that. That's going to be really nice. Now, as you may have noticed, I'm quite new to this videoing thing and doing the voiceovers, and I was a little bit shy doing the video footage first. So there's more pictures and video footage, but as we move along, there is actually more video footage because I get a bit more comfortable talking into the camera. So you're going to see a lot more videos of the construction and me actually involved in the construction and my commentary as I go along with the construction as well. A lot of constructions in that sentence, which is fine. Okay, so that's it for this video. And again, if you've got any questions, then just ask them and I will happily answer them. And please do subscribe and hit the like button and the little bell indicator so that you can also get notifications of the next video. I'm going to try and pump these out as fast as possible because I need to get this booth built. So until next time, happy booth building.